Kyle here from allmediareviews.blogspot.com, and let me do this. And this is part 2 of Random Artists feature on Cloud Cult. So I left off with the advice from the Happy Hippopotamus, which I think it came out in 2005. I'm pretty sure this is a 2005 album, which personally copyright 2005 Earthology Records, as you can see. But 2005 was a great year for music. But again, that was maybe one of the first times I actually started to acknowledge, who's this local band called Cloud Cult that everyone talks about? Is there anything more to them than some of these standard sort of generic pop rock bands? And there was more to them. So, but I still hadn't really become a fan. I just knew their name, and it's like the word cult in them. I thought it was just like a jam band, but you're joining a cult, but not the case necessarily. So, but then in 2007, they released an album called The Meaning of Eight, which there's a profound sort of difference or segue or whatever transition from this record, The Vice of the Happy Hippopotamus, to The Meaning of Eight I've found. Just in that I think they really found their footing a lot with songwriting, and their songwriting, to me, just got to be more accessible and more, I don't know. I want to say it's better because it's different, but it definitely, there's a lot of their kind of popular staple live tracks that were on this, and some of the members had been kind of coming and going at this point. As I mentioned in the documentary, you kind of learn more about that. But I mean, Chain Reaction, Please Remain Calm, Chemicals Collide, Pretty Voice, those first 4 tracks especially, they play frequently live, and they've pretty much all been on the radio. Take Your Medicine's another one, 2x2x2. As far as the title goes, as Craig Minowa explained in the documentary, and there's more about it, it's sort of about the number 8 and having connections with the number 8. I mean, there's a tie-in still to his son Caden in here, of course, and there's a few references, but I found that the focus still was on this concept, and it's an interesting album. I think also there was another thing about it, whether their son would have been turning 8. Well, that's not the case. There's a bunch of 8 nuggets per se on this record. Dance for the Dead's another one. This is the song, the dance for the living, but I also think Craig's vocal lines, like vocal melodies, and even the lyrics started to really even improve on this record, and that's why I kind of look at this as the first record in sort of the next era where they became more, I don't want to call them exactly a bedroom project or a studio project, we were getting well known live before this, but I just kind of look at this as a sort of a slight breakthrough record. So then moving on, that was in 2007, The Meaning of Eight. The next year was Feel Good Ghost, and this is the first album as I've explained in the first video, I became a fan really, and oh man, the string arrangements and sort of the vocal harmonies, and it had maybe their biggest hit up to that point. I mean, I mentioned Transistor Radio, but Everybody Hears a Cloud. That song was on the radio, on Radio KN, I think at this point, the local National Public Radio, or Municipal Public Radio, National Public affiliate with National Public Radio. The Current played it a fair amount. I don't know if it ever got played on some of the corporate stations, and it may have even been used in commercials and stuff like that. But it was around. At this point, they were kind of hard to ignore. But this album, besides that song, Everyone Hears a Cloud, is just, it's one of those consistent track for track records. It's one of those records where I listen to it all the way through every time. And it was in my top 10 albums from 2008. No One Said It Would Be Easy, which is also the title of the documentary they put out a couple years after. The Tornado Lessons, Journey to the Featherless, Ghost Inside Our Houses. The last song, Love You All, which is like, he uses like a sort of a vocoder, and it's very sad in a lot of sense, but it's also kind of happy, saying, whenever I die, I want you to know I loved you. And Cloud Cult's music is like that. It's very sort of, very uplifting, but very personal and honest and inspirational. It's inspired so many people. And at this point, I was like, why have I never heard that? Why haven't I gotten into this band? And are they prog rock? You could say that they're like art rock. Of course, I mentioned how they do paintings, and like the artwork is very distinct. They do paintings live and stuff. definitely art rock, and I kind of was kind of concluding that this stuff, and especially the early stuff, reminded me of two bands that I really liked, especially their early material, Dredge and Porcupine Tree. So I guess if you consider Dredge, and especially Porcupine Tree, progressive rock, why wouldn't you call Cloud Cult that? They maybe don't want to use the P word or whatever, but they use a lot of string arrangements, a lot of classical influences, but it's still rock music. There's heavy riffs, there's a lot of dynamics, a lot of sampling. The early stuff more so, but even at this point, they still were using samples. And there's a math rock element to this album, I think most prominent. Because I think in 2008, that was right when math rock was getting really big, like the band Battles and some other bands like that were getting popular. So then they released, I'll just kind of briefly go, Lost Songs from the Lost Years, and then the documentary I mentioned called No One Said It Would Be Easy. So I'm not going to be able to elaborate a ton on this, even though I've been trying to get into it in the last few weeks. There's some good stuff on here, though. What was the one that every time I've listened to it, I've enjoyed? I want to say, no, not Jaded Fable. Lightning Girl I enjoy, because that's on, I think, the Shade Project for sure. He does a cover of Tambourine Man. But you can see the dates on this vary, but oh man, Where Are You Now maybe, or Turn Out the Lights. Even the first song, Step Forward, is really good. So, and the documentary really gives you, an overview of their history at that point. It goes back to the 90s and talks about, of course, the loss of Craig Minowa's and Connie Minowa's son. And it shows a lot of live footage and stuff on tour and so on. So then in 2010, they put out the record that even put them higher, on a higher plane to me, and that was Light Chasers. This is definitely one of my favorite records of the last 5 years, especially of this decade, this current decade we're in. And it's nearly 5 stars to me. This is an epic Journey record. There's only one slightly minor issue I have it with on 2 tracks, as I'm sensitive to sometimes when singers sing close to the microphone. There's a couple songs. It's, I believe it's You Were Born and Dawn. But other than those 2 segments, this is like an hour and change worth of just perfection. The riffs, the harmonies, the memorable melodies. Of course, Running with the Wolves has been frequently used on commercials in the Twin Cities, television, and even, I think, radio. And it got on the radio. It was an EP they put out. It's a terrific song. It may be the best song they've ever written, actually. It's sad in a lot of ways because they're, it's talking about a story about someone who kind of leaves home, and, for better or for worse. But the story behind this record is weird, because if you look at it, it's like it's talking about chasing light, but it almost is a narrative like a spaceship. So there's obviously like a sort of a space, the galaxies, the universe, our planet, and where we're in relation to everything that they write about. But at the heart of this record, it's just a wonderful story. It's wonderful, just moments. It's one of those classic records. I mean, I love specific songs. Today We Give Ourselves to the Fire, Room Full of People in Your Head. That's a terrifically experimental track that totally works. Kind of dynamics go crazy on that song. There's so much energy in us. It's so inspirational. It's a terrific closing song. And I guess I would recommend, if anyone's never heard Cloud Cult, this is the album to hear. If you like progressive rock especially. If you're more into like kind of catchy melodies, you might want to go with the previous record, Feel Good Ghost. It's actually not Feel Good Ghost. It's Feel Good Ghosts, Tea Partying Through Tornadoes. But anyway, but yeah, this record really put them over the top for me, and they definitely became like a staple local band for me, and just a band in general. It's like we have finally, after all these years of being in all these progressive rock bands, there's one that's in my town that is known outside of my town, because most of the prog rock bands I love in Minnesota, nobody knows outside of Minnesota. And they're not called prog rock by most people, but I would call them progressive, certainly. And they're just really good songwriters, really great compositions on a lot of these albums, especially this album, the previous album, the albums that have come since. So then in 2013, they put out their next record, Love, which I can't say on my end of year 2013 list, which was kind of a weird year for me anyways, it didn't rank at the top 10 the way that both Light Chasers was like number 4 and Feel Good Ghost was like number 10 that year. But, I revisited it a couple weeks ago and it's still a really good record. In fact, I would probably rank it in terms of their catalog ahead of everything since, at least since Feel, I would put it like on par almost with Feel Good Ghosts. I put it over The Meaning of Eight maybe. There's a couple songs on here that are just amazing. One by One, which they have, of course, Two by Two on The Meaning of Eight, but the vocal harmonies are just infectious on that. Sleepwalker is another one. They use some electronic textures, some like heavy riffs and electronic textures, kind of the combination, which is weird because they're very environmental and there's a lot of acoustic passages not only on this album but many of their songs like Transistor Radio or some of the songs on Meaning of Eight. But oh man, this is a terrific record. It didn't quite have like that epic feel the way that that Light Chasers did, and I didn't get quite attached to it even as much as Feel Good Ghost. But in revisiting it, I think this is as good of a record. It came out in that year. I would probably put it higher if I redid 2013. The big single was the song Good Friend, which actually the end of that, I think that the chorus is sort of not cliche, but it's all right. I like it, but I mean I think the second half of that song gets better. The Show Starts Now, Catharsis, Meet Me Where You're Going, Complicated Creation. They love the word creation. It's weird. Chemicals, creation. There's Craig in his lyric writing, assuming he does most of the lyric writing, loves words like creation and collide, like words with C. Go figure, their name is Cloud Cult. So anyway, and so then they released, I think it was 2014, yeah, they put out a live acoustic record, which includes, a lot of their more recent songs. A few older songs, as I mentioned maybe in the previous video, but a lot of stuff from both Feel Good Ghosts and Light Chasers and even Love, of course. Yeah, and some of the arrangements are different too. I can't remember. Pretty Voice, I think it is, was one they changed the arrangement pretty significantly with like maybe horns, like the trumpet parts and the French horn, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's a pretty good set list, and they're really a band. If you ever get the chance to see live, you should do it. They're playing again next month, and I probably will end up going, even though I kind of was talking to the fiance saying, because I just saw a concert a couple nights ago and a few weeks ago with Godspeed You Black Emperor. So, but I'm going to stop here, and then I have a separate video. I'm going to talk about the new record called The Seeker.